Hey guys, tonight we're diving into one of the most unexpectedly mundane divine competitions in Greek mythology, the time Athena basically became the world's first agricultural entrepreneur. Picture this. You're floating above Mount Olympus on a particularly slow Tuesday, watching the goddess of wisdom and warfare pace back and forth across the marble floors like she's having the world's most divine midlife crisis. Her owl perches nearby, occasionally hooting what sounds suspiciously like "get a hobby" in ancient Greek. You can see the frustration etched across Athena's eternally youthful face as she surveys the endless cycle of mortal wars below. Another city-state squabble, another siege, another group of sweaty warriors praying for her guidance while they wave bronze swords around like they're conducting the world's most violent orchestra. The thing is, after centuries of the same old "help us win this battle" prayers, even divine wisdom gets a bit stale. You probably won't survive the sheer tedium of watching gods get bored, but here we are. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment letting me know where you're listening from and what time it is in your corner of the world. I love seeing how this ancient Greek drama is reaching people everywhere from midnight in Manchester to sunrise in Sydney. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You watch as Athena suddenly stops pacing, her grey eyes lighting up with that particular gleam that historically means either brilliant inspiration or catastrophic divine intervention. She's just received word that the mortals down in Attica, that's the region around modern-day Athens, need a patron deity. Not just any patron deity, mind you, but one who can offer something genuinely useful to help their fledgling city-state thrive. The competition is open, and Athena's competitive nature, honed by millennia of strategic warfare, immediately kicks into high gear. But here's where it gets interesting. Instead of defaulting to her usual war goddess repertoire, Athena finds herself contemplating something entirely different. You can almost see the gears turning in her divine mind as she considers what these mortals actually need. Sure, they need protection from enemies, but they also need food, trade, prosperity, the building blocks of civilization itself. It's a refreshing change from her usual divine duties, which mostly involve helping heroes not die quite as quickly as they otherwise would. The timing couldn't be more perfect. Archaeological evidence suggests that around the 8th century BCE, Athens was indeed transitioning from a collection of scattered settlements into a more unified polis, desperately seeking both identity and economic stability. Historians still argue whether the olive cultivation in Attica predates this mythological competition or emerged afterward, but the story reflects a very real historical shift toward agricultural specialization in the region. As you observe Athena's growing excitement, you notice something peculiar about her thought process. Unlike her usual lightning-fast strategic calculations, she's taking her time with this decision, almost as if she's savoring the novelty of thinking beyond military tactics. Her fingers drum against the marble balustrade as she watches the mortals below going about their daily lives farming, trading, building, creating. There's something deeply appealing about the idea of nurturing rather than just protecting, of giving mortals the tools to build something lasting rather than simply helping them survive the next battle. The transformation in Athena's demeanor is remarkable. You can see her shoulders relaxing for the first time in centuries as she contemplates this new challenge. Her owl, sensing the shift in mood, preens its feathers with what looks distinctly like approval. Even her usually pristine armor seems to gleam a bit brighter, as if reflecting her renewed sense of purpose. This isn't just about winning a competition, though. Athena's competitive streak definitely plays a role. It's about the chance to create something genuinely beneficial, something that could last for generations, rather than just determining the outcome of the next skirmish. You can almost feel her divine energy shifting from its usual war-focused intensity to something more creative, more nurturing, though she'd probably challenge you to a duel for suggesting she's gone soft. You drift closer to the divine drama unfolding as Zeus himself materializes on his golden throne, apparently having grown tired of whatever he was doing in his personal chambers, which, knowing Zeus, could have been anything from composing thunder symphonies to turning into a swan for reasons best left unexplored. The king of the gods surveys his assembled family with that particular expression that means someone's about to get a divine assignment whether they want it or not. The mortals of Attica, Zeus announces in his voice that sounds like distant thunder mixed with a game show host. Require a patron deity. You watch as several gods perk up with interest, though most of them are probably just happy for something to break up the eternal monotony of Olympian politics. The requirements are surprisingly specific for a divine competition. Whoever wins must provide the mortals with something genuinely useful, something that will help their city prosper for generations to come. You can see Athena's eyes narrow with the kind of focused intensity usually reserved for planning military campaigns. This is right in her wheelhouse, not just the competition aspect, but the intellectual challenge of determining what would actually benefit mortals most. Her mind is already racing through possibilities, weighing options with the same methodical precision she brings to battle strategy. Meanwhile, you notice Poseidon rolling his shoulders and cracking his knuckles like he's preparing for the divine equivalent of a strongman competition. The historical context here is fascinating. Archaeological evidence from the 8th century BCE suggests that Athens was indeed undergoing a crucial period of political and economic development, transitioning from a Bronze Age settlement into what would become one of the ancient world's most influential city-states. The competition between Athena and Poseidon likely reflects real tensions between maritime and agricultural economies in the region. Poseidon steps forward first, his trident gleaming with the kind of confidence that comes from being lord of the seas. You can practically feel the salt spray as he gestures dramatically toward the Attic coastline. "These mortals live near the water," he declares, "and I am the sea itself. My gift will connect them to the vast networks of trade and travel that span the Mediterranean." It's actually a pretty compelling argument. Maritime commerce was indeed crucial to Athens' eventual prosperity. But you notice something interesting in Athena's reaction. Instead of immediately countering with her own proposal, she's listening intently, processing not just what Poseidon is saying, but what he's not saying. Her strategic mind is already identifying the potential weaknesses in a purely maritime approach. Sure, sea trade is profitable, but it's also unpredictable, dangerous, and dependent on factors beyond mortal control. What happens during storms? What about inland communities? How do you build lasting prosperity on something as changeable as the sea? The competition format is elegantly simple, which probably reflects Zeus's desire to avoid the kind of complex divine bureaucracy that had recently resulted in a 3-century argument over who gets to control morning dew. Each contestant will present their gift to the mortals, and the mortals themselves will choose their patron based on which offering they find most valuable. It's democracy in action, millennia before the Athenians would formalize the concept politically. You watch as other gods begin to lose interest. Ares wanders off to watch a particularly brutal gladiatorial match. Aphrodite becomes distracted by her reflection in a nearby fountain, and Hermes starts juggling what appear to be miniature lightning bolts while humming a tune that sounds suspiciously like elevator music. But Athena and Poseidon remain laser-focused on the challenge ahead. The stakes are higher than they initially appear. Whichever deity wins won't just gain another city's worship, they'll essentially be shaping the economic and cultural foundation of what could become a major power in the ancient world. Historians still argue whether this mythological competition reflects actual religious practices or represents a later attempt to explain Athens' unique blend of maritime and agricultural prosperity, but the story captures something essential about the city's character. As the formal announcement concludes, you can see both competitors beginning their mental preparations. Poseidon's approach seems straightforward. He'll demonstrate his power over the seas and emphasize the wealth that comes from maritime trade. But Athena's strategy is more complex, more nuanced. She's not just thinking about immediate impact, but long-term sustainability, not just about wealth, but about the kind of prosperity that builds civilizations. The competition is set to take place on the Acropolis itself, that rocky outcrop that will eventually become the site of the Parthenon. You can almost sense the historical weight of the moment as both deities prepare to make their case to the mortals below. This isn't just about divine ego, it's about determining the fundamental character of what will become one of history's most influential cities. You follow the divine procession as it moves toward the Acropolis, where a crowd of mortals has gathered to witness what might be the most important product demonstration in human history. The rocky hill rises above the surrounding plains like nature's own amphitheater, and you can see the anticipation written across the faces of farmers, craftsmen, and merchants who've traveled from across Attica to witness their future being decided by divine competition. Poseidon strides forward first, his massive frame casting shadows that seem to ripple with oceanic energy. You watch as he raises his trident, that three-pronged symbol of maritime power that's been terrifying sailors and impressing beachgoers since the dawn of time. The weapon catches the Mediterranean sunlight and throws it back in dazzling patterns that make the assembled mortals shield their eyes and murmur appreciatively. This is showmanship at its finest, the kind of spectacle that would make modern marketing executives weep with envy. With a dramatic flourish that would make Broadway actors jealous, Poseidon brings his trident down against the rocky surface of the Acropolis. The impact resonates through the stone like a cosmic tuning fork, and you can feel the vibrations in your bones as the very bedrock of Athens responds to divine power. Cracks spider outward from the point of impact, and suddenly, impossibly, water begins to bubble up from the depths of the earth itself. The mortals gasp and surge forward as a spring materializes before their eyes, not just any spring, but one that flows with the kind of abundance that could supply an entire city. You can see the immediate appeal. Water is life, and in the Mediterranean climate, a reliable water source represents security, prosperity, and the foundation of urban civilization. Several of the assembled farmers nod approvingly, already calculating how this divine gift could transform their agricultural prospects. But here's where things get interesting. And by interesting, I mean the kind of plot twist that makes you question whether the gods actually think these plans through. As the first brave mortal approaches the miraculous spring and cups the water in his hands, his expression of wonder quickly transforms into one of profound disappointment. The water is salt water, as briny and undrinkable as the sea itself. You watch the crowd's enthusiasm deflate like a punctured wineskin as word spreads through the gathering. It's regular seawater, bubbling up from some divine connection to Poseidon's oceanic realm. Useful for cleaning, perhaps, and certainly impressive from a supernatural standpoint, but about as helpful for daily life as a chocolate teapot. The historical irony here is that Athens actually did struggle with fresh water supplies throughout its classical period, making Poseidon's gift feel almost like divine trolling. The sea god seems genuinely surprised by the negative reaction. You can see him glancing around at the disappointed faces with the kind of confusion that suggests he might have overlooked some crucial details in his planning phase. From his perspective, he's just provided a permanent connection to his vast oceanic domain surely that's worth something. The problem is that most mortals can't breathe underwater or survive on a diet of saltwater and seaweed. Historians still argue whether this mythological saltwater spring represents an actual geological feature on the Acropolis or simply serves as a metaphor for the limitations of purely maritime-focused prosperity. Archaeological evidence does suggest that ancient Athens struggled with water management, though whether this involved supernatural springs is considerably less certain. The crowd begins to murmur with the kind of polite disappointment usually reserved for receiving socks as birthday presents. Some of the more diplomatically minded mortals attempt to look impressed, nodding and making appreciative comments about the spring's unique properties and spiritual significance. But you can see the practical-minded farmers and craftsmen exchanging glances that clearly communicate their shared assessment. This is not exactly the game-changing divine gift they were hoping for. Poseidon, to his credit, attempts to salvage the situation with some impromptu divine marketing. He gestures toward the spring and begins explaining how salt water can be used for preservation, how it connects the city to the vast trading networks of the Mediterranean, how it represents the endless possibilities of maritime commerce. It's not entirely unconvincing. Salt was indeed valuable in the ancient world, and the symbolic connection to sea trade does have merit. But you can sense that the momentum has shifted. The crowd's initial awe has been replaced by a more cautious evaluation of practical benefits. They're looking at this saltwater spring the way modern consumers might examine a revolutionary new gadget that turns out to require 17 different adapters and a PhD in engineering to operate properly. As Poseidon's presentation winds down, you notice Athena watching intently from the sidelines. Her expression reveals nothing, but you can almost see her mental calculations adjusting based on her uncle's unexpectedly lukewarm reception. The bar has been set, and while it's not exactly stratospheric, it's given her valuable information about what these mortals actually need versus what might initially impress them. You sense the crowd's energy shift as Athena steps forward, her approach markedly different from Poseidon's theatrical display. Where her uncle had commanded attention through raw power and spectacle, Athena moves with the quiet confidence of someone who spent considerable time thinking this through. Her grey eyes scan the assembled mortals with the analytical precision of a general surveying a battlefield, but there's something gentler in her expression, almost maternal, though she'd probably challenge anyone to a wrestling match for suggesting she's gone soft. Without any dramatic gestures or cosmic sound effects, Athena simply kneels down and begins working with the rocky soil of the Acropolis. You watch as her fingers, more accustomed to gripping spear shafts and shield handles, carefully clear away stones and debris with surprising tenderness. The mortals lean forward, curious but perhaps slightly underwhelmed by this quieter approach after Poseidon's earth-shaking performance. From seemingly nowhere, Athena produces a small seed, though calling it small doesn't quite capture its appearance. It's roughly the size of a grape pit, dark and unremarkable, the kind of thing you might absent-mindedly spit out while eating fruit. Several of the watching mortals exchange puzzled glances, clearly wondering if this is some kind of divine joke. After witnessing a magical spring materialize from solid rock, they're being presented with what appears to be agricultural leftovers. But you notice something the mortals miss. The seed seems to pulse with an inner light, as if it contains compressed starlight or condensed wisdom. Athena places it carefully in the small depression she's created, covers it with soil, and then does something that will become legendary in agricultural circles. She waters it with what appears to be regular water from an ordinary clay vessel. No lightning, no earthquakes, no dramatic divine intervention, just careful, methodical planting. The transformation happens so gradually that you almost miss it. A tiny green shoot emerges from the soil, then another, then a delicate stem that begins to grow, with the kind of steady persistence that makes time-lapse photography so satisfying. The watching mortals murmur with increasing interest as the plant develops before their eyes, but it's still not clear what exactly they're witnessing. Within minutes, the shoot has become a sapling, then a young tree with a distinctive twisted trunk and narrow, silvery green leaves that catch the sunlight in a way that makes them seem to shimmer like liquid mercury. The tree continues growing until it reaches perhaps 10 feet in height, its branches spreading in an elegant canopy that provides genuine shade in the Mediterranean heat. You can see the mortals' confusion deepening. It's undeniably impressive to watch a tree grow from seed to maturity in mere minutes, but they're still processing what this actually means for their daily lives. Some of them glance toward Poseidon's saltwater spring, perhaps wondering if they should have been more appreciative of that particular divine gift. At least they understood what water was supposed to do, even if it was the wrong kind of water. The historical significance of this moment cannot be overstated. Archaeological evidence suggests that olive cultivation in the Mediterranean region dates back at least 60 years, but the specific varieties that would make Athens famous were indeed developed through careful selection and cultivation. The olive tree that Athena creates represents not just a plant, but the foundation of what would become one of the ancient world's most important agricultural economies. Athena stands back and gestures toward her creation with quiet pride. "This is the olive tree," she announces, and you can hear the capital letters in her voice. "Its fruit will nourish you. Its oil will light your lamps, preserve your food, and strengthen your bodies. It will grow in soil too poor for grain, survive droughts that kill other crops, and continue producing for centuries." The crowd's reaction is mixed. You can see some of the older, more experienced farmers nodding thoughtfully as they examine the tree's hardy appearance and consider the implications of its drought resistance. But many of the younger mortals are clearly struggling to understand how this strange silvery tree competes with a magical spring, even one that produces salt water. Historians still argue whether olive cultivation in Attica was already established before this mythological competition or whether it represents the introduction of new agricultural techniques from other Mediterranean regions. The timing aligns with what archaeologists call the olive revolution of the 8th century BCE, when olive oil production became increasingly sophisticated and economically significant. One particularly brave mortal approaches the tree and plucks one of its fruits. You watch his face scrunch up in disgust as he bites into the bitter, astringent flesh. The raw olive is almost inedible, intensely bitter, with a texture that seems designed to discourage consumption. Several other mortals try the fruit with similarly unimpressed results. and you can sense Athena's gift losing ground to Poseidon's admittedly problematic but at least immediately comprehensible spring. You witness what might be the ancient world's first agricultural research and development crisis as the mortals stare at Athena's olive tree with the kind of polite bewilderment usually reserved for receiving abstract art as a housewarming gift. The bitter taste of raw olives lingers on their tongues, and you can practically see the collective thought bubble forming above their heads. How exactly is this supposed to help us? Athena, however, seems remarkably unfazed by their initial confusion. You watch as she approaches the tree and begins what amounts to the world's first agricultural demonstration. With the patience of someone who spent millennia teaching mortals how to use fire without burning down their villages, she carefully explains that the olive's true value lies not in eating the fruit directly, but in what can be extracted from it. The oil, she says, crushing several olives between her palms to demonstrate, is where the magic happens. A golden liquid seeps between her fingers, and you can see several mortals lean forward with renewed interest. But extracting oil from olives, as it turns out, is considerably more complex than simply squeezing them like oversized grapes. This is where the real trial and error begins. You observe the mortals' first attempts at olive oil production, which range from ineffective to mildly catastrophic. Some try crushing the olives with rocks, producing a bitter, pulpy mess that's more paste than oil. Others attempt to boil them, creating what can only be described as olive soup. One particularly enterprising group tries burying the olives in sand and jumping on them, which produces mostly sandy olive paste and several sprained ankles. The historical reality of early olive oil production was indeed a process of gradual discovery and refinement. Archaeological evidence from sites across the Mediterranean shows that early olive processing involved stone mortars, wooden presses, and techniques that evolved over generations. The development of efficient oil extraction methods was crucial to the economic success of olive cultivation. Over the following days, because divine gifts apparently come with a learning curve, the mortals begin to develop more sophisticated techniques. You watch as they experiment with different methods of crushing, pressing, and separating the oil from the pulp. They discover that grinding the olives to a paste and then pressing it yields better results than simply crushing them. They learn that adding warm water helps separate the oil, which floats to the surface in golden droplets. The breakthrough comes when one of the craftsmen, applying his knowledge of winemaking, constructs a simple wooden press. You can see the excitement ripple through the crowd as they watch the first clear streams of olive oil flowing from the pressed fruit. The oil is golden, aromatic, and completely different from the bitter, astringent taste of the raw olives. It's like discovering that the ugly duckling was actually a swan all along. But the learning process is far from over. The mortals quickly discover that not all olive oil is created equal. Oil pressed from ripe olives tastes different from oil pressed from green ones. The first pressing produces the highest quality oil, while subsequent pressings yield progressively lower grades. They learn to separate the oil from the bitter vegetable water, to filter out impurities, and to store it properly to prevent spoilage. Historians still argue whether these early olive processing techniques developed independently in different regions or spread through trade and cultural exchange. The sophistication of classical-era olive oil production suggests centuries of refinement and innovation, much of which probably involved exactly the kind of trial-and-error experimentation you're witnessing. You notice that Athena occasionally offers subtle guidance, but she's careful not to simply solve all their problems for them. Instead, she provides hints and suggestions, nudging them toward more effective techniques while allowing them to maintain ownership of their discoveries. It's divine mentorship at its finest. Here's exactly what to do, and more. Have you considered trying this approach? The economic implications begin to dawn on the mortals as they realize they've not just learned to make olive oil, but to make it efficiently and consistently. You can see the merchants among them calculating potential trade values, while the farmers consider how many trees they could plant on their lands. The olive tree isn't just producing food, it's potentially producing wealth. As word spreads about the successful oil extraction, more mortals arrive to witness the process and learn the techniques. What started as a simple divine gift is becoming a knowledge-sharing network, with experienced oil makers teaching newcomers and everyone contributing improvements to the process. You're watching the birth of what will become one of the ancient world's most important industries. The transformation in the crowd's attitude toward Athena's gift is remarkable. Where they initially saw a mysterious tree bearing inedible fruit, they now see the foundation of agricultural prosperity. The olive tree represents not just sustenance, but economic opportunity, technological innovation, and the kind of sustainable wealth that can support entire communities for generations. You float above the bustling Attic countryside as the olive revolution spreads like divine wildfire through the region. What began as a handful of curious mortals experimenting with Athena's gift has transformed into something approaching an agricultural gold rush. Farmers who once struggled to make marginal land profitable are now planting olive saplings with the enthusiasm of prospectors who've struck the mother lode. The transformation is remarkable to witness. You can see merchant ships arriving at Athenian ports, their holds empty of cargo but their captains' eyes bright with anticipation. Word has spread throughout the Mediterranean that Athens has discovered something extraordinary: golden oil that burns cleaner than animal fat, preserves food better than salt, and commands prices that make established traders recalculate their entire business models. Within just a few years, olive oil has become what economists would recognize as a luxury commodity with mass market appeal. The highest grades, pressed from perfectly ripe olives and filtered through the finest cloths, sell for prices that make even wealthy merchants wince. But lower grades remain affordable enough for ordinary households, creating a market with unprecedented depth and sustainability. You watch as Athens transforms from a regional agricultural center into the Mediterranean's olive oil capital. The city's potters, recognizing opportunity when it hits them over the head with a wooden press, begin producing specialized amphora designed specifically for oil storage and transport. These distinctive vessels, with their narrow necks and sealed stoppers, become as recognizable as modern corporate logos throughout the ancient world. The economic ripple effects are staggering. Historians estimate that by the 6th century BCE, olive oil represented as much as 40% of Athens' total export revenue, making it one of the ancient world's most valuable single commodities. The wealth generated from olive cultivation funded everything from military expansion to architectural projects, including the eventual construction of the Parthenon itself. But you notice something even more significant than the immediate economic impact. The olive trade is creating networks of relationships that extend far beyond simple commerce. Athenian merchants aren't just selling oil, they're establishing trading posts, forming partnerships with foreign distributors, and creating the kind of commercial infrastructure that will support the city's imperial ambitions for centuries to come. The agricultural science behind this success is fascinating. You observe farmers discovering that olive trees, unlike grain crops, actually improve marginal land over time. Their deep roots prevent erosion, their leaf litter enriches the soil, and their ability to thrive in poor conditions makes previously unusable hillsides profitable. It's sustainable agriculture millennia before the concept has a name. The social implications are equally profound. Olive cultivation requires significant initial investment. Trees take several years to begin producing and decades to reach peak productivity, but once established, they can produce for centuries. This creates a form of generational wealth that encourages long-term thinking and social stability. Families begin planning not just for the next harvest, but for the next generation's inheritance. You can see the transformation in Athens' urban landscape as olive wealth flows through the economy. New workshops appear, specializing in everything from olive presses to oil lamps. The city's metalworkers develop specialized bronze vessels for oil storage. Even the construction industry benefits as successful olive farmers build larger homes and more elaborate tombs. The international competition is beginning to take notice. You watch as delegations from other city-states arrive to study Athenian olive cultivation techniques, some offering alliances and trade agreements, others clearly planning to develop their own competing olive industries. The island of Lesbos, already known for its wine, begins experimenting with olive varieties. The Italian peninsula, with its similar climate, starts importing Athenian olive saplings. Historians still argue whether this rapid expansion of olive cultivation represents actual historical development or mythological compression of a process that took centuries. Archaeological evidence suggests that olive oil production did indeed experience dramatic growth in the 8th and 7th centuries BCE, though whether this happened as quickly as the myth suggests is debatable. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of this economic transformation is how it changes Athens' relationship with its environment. Instead of simply extracting resources from the land, the Athenians are learning to work with natural systems in ways that benefit both human prosperity and ecological health. The olive tree becomes a symbol of this new approach: productive, sustainable, and beautiful. As you observe the steady stream of oil-laden ships departing from Athenian harbors, you realize you're witnessing the birth of something unprecedented, an economy based not on conquest or exploitation, but on the patient cultivation of a divine gift that keeps giving. Athena's simple seed has grown into the foundation of what will become one of history's most influential civilizations. You descend closer to the carefully tended olive groves that now dot the Attic landscape like silver-green jewels, and immediately sense that something profound has happened to the mortal's relationship with these trees. What began as simple agriculture has evolved into something approaching religious devotion. Every olive tree is considered sacred, not just in the abstract sense that all of nature might be divine, but specifically as personal property of Athena herself. The rituals surrounding olive cultivation have become elaborate affairs that blend practical farming with spiritual ceremony. You watch as farmers approach their trees each morning with the kind of reverence usually reserved for temple worship. Before beginning their daily work, they pour small libations of wine at the base of each tree, whisper prayers for healthy growth, and carefully inspect every branch for signs of disease or pest damage with the intensity of priests reading omens. The harvest season has become Athens' most sacred time of year, a period when the entire community comes together to honor both the goddess and her gift. You observe the opening ceremony, where the city's most respected elder approaches the oldest and most productive tree, invariably called Athena's firstborn, and performs a complex ritual involving olive oil, honey, and hymns that sound like agricultural poetry set to music. What's particularly fascinating is how these religious practices have enhanced, rather than hindered, the practical aspects of olive cultivation. The careful daily inspection that forms part of the morning prayers means that problems are caught early, before they can spread throughout the grove. The community involvement in harvest rituals ensures that everyone knows proper picking techniques and timing. It's spiritual practice with measurable agricultural benefits. You notice that each olive grove has its own small shrine, usually consisting of a simple stone altar surrounded by the most beautiful examples of Athena's sacred trees. These shrines serve as both worship sites and community gathering places where farmers share knowledge, discuss techniques, and collectively solve problems. The goddess of wisdom has inspired a remarkably practical form of religious devotion. The legal implications of this sacred status are surprisingly complex. Since every olive tree technically belongs to Athena, damaging or destroying one is considered not just vandalism but sacrilege. The penalties are severer fines, exile, or in extreme cases, death. This legal protection has created what might be the ancient world's first environmental conservation program, ensuring that olive groves are maintained and protected for future generations. Archaeological evidence from classical Athens supports the existence of these protective laws. Inscriptions describe court cases involving olive tree destruction, and the punishments recorded suggest that the Athenians took these crimes extremely seriously. The sacred status of olive trees wasn't just religious theater, it was practical environmental policy enforced by divine authority. The priests who oversee these olive ceremonies have developed their own specialized knowledge that rivals that of professional farmers. You watch as they examine soil conditions, assess tree health, and predict harvest yields with accuracy that would impress modern agricultural scientists. Their religious training includes extensive education in what we might call sustainable farming practices. But the most remarkable aspect of this religious system is how it's created a sense of collective responsibility for the olive industry. Since the trees belong to Athena, every citizen of Athens has a stake in their welfare. Children learn to recognize signs of olive tree disease before they can read. Merchants factor grove health into their business planning. Even soldiers on campaign carry olive saplings to establish new groves in conquered territories. The seasonal festivals that celebrate different stages of olive growth have become central to Athenian social life. The spring blessing ceremony, when new growth is celebrated, involves the entire community in elaborate processions through the groves. The summer pruning festival combines necessary tree maintenance with religious observance and social gatherings. The autumn harvest celebration rivals any modern agricultural fair for its combination of practical demonstration and community celebration. Historians still argue whether these religious practices developed organically from practical farming needs or were deliberately created to reinforce social cooperation around olive cultivation. The integration of spiritual and agricultural concerns suggests a sophisticated understanding of how religious authority can support economic development. You observe that the sacred status of olive trees has also influenced Athens' foreign policy. Diplomatic gifts now routinely include olive oil and olive saplings, presented as direct blessings from Athena herself. Foreign dignitaries are taken on tours of the sacred groves, and trade agreements often include provisions for protecting olive cultivation in allied territories. The psychological impact of this religious framework is profound. Farmers don't just grow olive trees, they serve as caretakers of divine gifts. This transforms routine agricultural work into spiritual practice, creating a sense of purpose and meaning that extends far beyond simple economic motivation. It's motivational psychology, disguised as religious devotion, and it's remarkably effective. You hover above the Mediterranean landscape as the darker implications of Athens' olive prosperity begin to manifest. The sacred groves that once seemed like symbols of divine blessing and peaceful prosperity have become military targets, turning Athena's gift into both weapon and vulnerability. Enemy commanders have discovered that attacking olive trees inflicts economic damage that can cripple a city more effectively than burning granaries or poisoning wells. The first major olive warfare incident occurs during a border dispute with Megara, Athens' perpetually annoying neighbor to the west. You watch as Megarian raiders slip across the frontier under cover of darkness, not to steal livestock or burn buildings, but to systematically destroy young olive trees with axes and fire. It's agricultural terrorism, designed to inflict economic damage that will last for decades. The psychological impact on the Athenians is devastating. You can see farmers discovering the destruction at dawn, falling to their knees among the charred stumps of trees that represented not just economic investment, but sacred trust. Some of them weep openly, others rage with the fury of parents whose children have been murdered. The attack isn't just vandalism, it's sacrilege, blasphemy, and economic warfare rolled into one devastating package. The strategic brilliance of this approach becomes apparent as you observe the aftermath. Unlike traditional military raids, which might destroy a season's grain harvest, olive tree destruction eliminates decades of productivity. A destroyed olive grove represents years of lost income, broken trade relationships, and communities forced to abandon their primary source of prosperity. It's the ancient equivalent of bombing a nation's oil refineries. Athens' response is swift and brutal. The city mobilizes not just its military but its entire population in what becomes known as the Olive War. You watch as Athenian forces sweep into Megarian territory with the kind of systematic thoroughness usually reserved for genocidal campaigns. Every Megarian olive tree is cut down, every olive press destroyed, every amphora of oil either confiscated or smashed. The escalation is remarkable to witness. What began as a relatively minor territorial dispute has evolved into total agricultural warfare, with both sides targeting the foundation of each other's economic prosperity. Historians would later recognize this as one of the first recorded instances of what modern military theorists call economic warfare, deliberately targeting civilian infrastructure to cripple enemy capacity rather than simply defeating armies. The psychological warfare aspects are equally sophisticated. You observe Athenian soldiers not just destroying Megarian olive trees, but desecrating the small shrines that surround them. They pour wine offerings into the soil and then urinate on the sacred altars, transforming religious desecration into a tool of military humiliation. It's spiritual warfare designed to break enemy morale along with their economy. But the most disturbing innovation in this conflict is the development of what might be called olive sabotage. Rather than simply cutting down trees, which is obvious and immediate, attackers begin using more subtle methods. They introduce insects that damage trees slowly, apply salt to soil around root systems, and even develop primitive forms of biological warfare using plant diseases that spread naturally through olive groves. The counterintelligence efforts are equally creative. You watch as Athens develops networks of grove watchers, farmers who patrol their territories at night looking for signs of sabotage. They create early warning systems using signal fires and messenger birds, establishing communication networks that rival military intelligence operations. Olive farming has become a matter of national security. The economic implications ripple throughout the Mediterranean, as other city-states realize the vulnerability that comes with agricultural specialization. You can see merchant cities reconsidering their dependence on olive oil imports, while agricultural regions begin diversifying their crops to avoid creating single point-of-failure vulnerabilities. The olive wars are teaching harsh lessons about the relationship between prosperity and security. Archaeological evidence from this period shows increased fortification around olive groves, including watchtowers, defensive walls, and even underground storage facilities for preserving olive oil during sieges. The sacred groves that once symbolized peaceful prosperity have become militarized zones, requiring constant protection. The diplomatic consequences are far-reaching. Treaties now include specific provisions protecting olive trees, with detailed penalties for agricultural warfare. You observe ambassadors negotiating olive clauses that treat grove destruction as equivalent to attacks on civilian populations. International law is evolving to address this new form of warfare. Historians still argue whether these olive wars represent a genuine historical development or mythological exaggeration of more routine agricultural conflicts. The archaeological evidence suggests that olive cultivation did indeed face military threats throughout the classical period, though whether these reached the systematic level described in later sources remains debatable. As you watch the smoke rising from destroyed groves across the Greek countryside, you realize that Athena's peaceful gift has revealed a fundamental paradox of prosperity. Success creates vulnerability, and the more valuable something becomes, the more attractive it becomes as a target for those who wish to cause harm. You descend into the heart of the Attic countryside during the autumn harvest season, where the annual olive gathering has evolved into something resembling a cross between agricultural festival and military operation. The sacred groves that once seemed so peaceful now bristle with activity as entire communities mobilize for what has become the most crucial time of year, not just economically, but strategically and spiritually. The organization required for a successful olive harvest is staggering to witness. You observe families arriving at the groves before dawn, carrying ladders that have been crafted specifically for olive picking, woven baskets designed to prevent bruising the precious fruit, and cloth sheets that will be spread beneath the trees to catch falling olives. The logistics rival those of a small army preparing for campaign. The traditional method of olive harvesting, which you watch being demonstrated by experienced pickers, requires a delicate balance between speed and care. The olives must be picked at exactly the right moment too early, and they yield less oil; too late and they begin to spoil. Workers climb into the twisted branches with the agility of acrobats, carefully hand-picking each olive while avoiding damage to the branches that will produce next year's crop. But you also notice the development of more aggressive harvesting techniques, driven by the military realities of the olive wars. Some farmers have begun using long poles to beat the branches, causing ripe olives to fall onto the sheets below. It's faster than hand-picking, but potentially damaging to the trees. The desperation to harvest quickly, before enemy raiders can destroy the crop, is changing centuries-old agricultural practices. The social dynamics of harvest season are fascinating to observe. Extended families work together, with specific roles assigned based on age and ability. Children too young to climb gather fallen olives from the ground and sort them by quality. Elderly relatives, no longer able to climb, supervise the pressing operations and share their accumulated wisdom about oil quality. Everyone contributes according to their capabilities. The community cooperation extends beyond individual families. You watch as neighboring farmers coordinate their harvests, sharing equipment and labor in carefully orchestrated sequences. A single olive press serves multiple families, operating continuously during harvest season as each group takes their turn processing their fruit. The timing requires military-level precision to ensure that everyone's olives are processed at peak freshness. Archaeological evidence from classical Athens reveals sophisticated olive processing facilities that could handle massive quantities of fruit during the brief harvest window. Stone pressing platforms, bronze collection vessels, and storage facilities suggest an industry capable of processing thousands of amphorae of oil each season. The quality control measures that have developed around olive harvesting would impress modern food scientists. You observe experienced oil makers testing samples throughout the pressing process, adjusting techniques based on the characteristics of each batch of fruit. They've learned to identify optimal ripeness by color, firmness, and even scent, developing expertise that takes decades to master. The spiritual dimension of harvest season adds another layer of complexity to the proceedings. Each day begins with offerings to Athena, and specific rituals mark different stages of the harvest process. The first olives picked from each tree are reserved for the goddess, while the final pressing of the season involves elaborate ceremonies thanking her for the year's bounty. But underneath the celebratory atmosphere, you can sense the constant tension created by the ongoing olive wars. Guards patrol the perimeter of each grove, and signal fires stand ready to warn of approaching raiders. Harvest crews work with weapons close at hand, prepared to defend their crops from sabotage or direct attack. It's agricultural work conducted under siege conditions. The physical demands of olive harvesting are considerable. You watch workers spending 12-hour days in the trees, their hands stained black from olive juice, their bodies aching from the repetitive motions of picking and reaching. By the end of harvest season, even the youngest and strongest workers are exhausted. It's back-breaking labor that must be completed within a narrow window of optimal ripeness. Historians still argue whether the communal harvest practices described in classical sources reflect actual historical development or idealized descriptions of rural cooperation. The archaeological evidence suggests that olive harvesting did indeed require substantial community coordination, though the specific details of harvest organization may have varied significantly between regions and periods. The economic pressure to maximize each harvest has led to innovations that balance efficiency with quality. You observe the development of selective picking techniques, where workers make multiple passes through each tree, harvesting olives at different stages of ripeness for different grades of oil. It's more labor-intensive, but it maximizes the value extracted from each tree. As the sun sets over the olive groves and the day's harvest is carried to the pressing facilities, you can see the satisfaction on the workers' faces, despite their exhaustion. They've not just gathered a crop, they've secured their economic future, honored their goddess, and maintained traditions that connect them to generations of ancestors who performed these same rituals beneath these same ancient trees. You drift through the bustling workshops and households of Athens as the true versatility of Athena's gift becomes apparent in ways that would astonish modern consumers accustomed to single-purpose products. Olive oil, it turns out, is the ancient world's equivalent of a Swiss Army knife, single substance that serves dozens of functions across every aspect of daily life, from the purely practical to the surprisingly luxurious. The most obvious use, lighting, has revolutionized Athenian nights. You watch as households fill their oil lamps with golden olive oil that burns with a clean, steady flame that puts smoky animal fat torches to shame. The light is brighter, the smoke is minimal, and the subtle aroma actually improves rather than pollutes indoor air quality. Athenian homes can now extend their productive hours well into the evening, supporting everything from craft work to social gatherings that would have been impossible in the pre-olive era. But the culinary applications extend far beyond simple cooking oil. You observe kitchens where olive oil serves as a preservative, coating cheeses and meats to prevent spoilage in the Mediterranean heat. Vegetables submerged in oil remain edible for months, creating a form of food security that allows families to survive lean periods and merchants to transport perishable goods across vast distances without refrigeration. The cosmetic and medicinal uses of olive oil reveal a sophisticated understanding of its properties that rivals modern dermatology. You watch as Athenian athletes massage olive oil into their skin before exercise, creating a protective barrier that prevents chafing while allowing sweat to evaporate efficiently. After their workouts, they scrape off the oil dirt mixture with bronze tools called strigils, leaving their skin clean and moisturized in a single efficient process. The medical applications are particularly impressive. Physicians use olive oil as a base for herbal remedies, mixing it with various plants and minerals to create treatments for everything from minor cuts to serious illnesses. The oil serves as both delivery system and healing agent, with its natural antibacterial properties helping to prevent infection while keeping wounds moist for optimal healing. Archaeological evidence from ancient medical texts describes olive oil treatments for conditions ranging from arthritis to depression, though historians still argue whether these remedies were genuinely effective or simply reflected the cultural reverence for Athena's gift. The placebo effect of using a sacred substance for healing was probably significant, regardless of any actual medicinal properties. You notice that olive oil has become essential to religious and ceremonial life throughout Athens. Bodies are anointed with oil before important rituals. Athletes are blessed with it before competitions, and even newborn babies receive olive oil massages that are believed to strengthen them and invoke Athena's protection. The oil serves as a physical link between mortals and the divine, transforming routine activities into spiritual practices. The textile industry has discovered that olive oil serves as an excellent leather conditioner, keeping armor, sandals, and other leather goods supple and waterproof. You watch craftsmen working olive oil into bronze armor straps, creating equipment that remains flexible and comfortable even during long campaigns. The oil also serves as a metal polish, giving bronze weapons and tools a gleaming finish that's both practical and impressive. The agricultural applications create a fascinating circular system where olive oil enhances the production of other crops. Farmers use it to coat seeds before planting, protecting them from insects and fungal infections. They mix it with various substances to create natural pesticides and fertilizers, and even use it to condition wooden farm tools, preventing cracking and extending their useful life. The economic implications of this versatility are staggering. A single amphora of olive oil can replace dozens of specialized products, making it incredibly valuable for trade and household management. Merchants love it because it's compact, stable, and serves multiple functions for their customers. Households appreciate it because one purchase meets numerous needs, reducing both storage requirements and shopping complexity. You observe the development of quality grades that reflect these different uses. The finest, first-pressed oil goes to wealthy households for food and cosmetics. Lower grades serve perfectly well for lighting and leather conditioning. Even the residual mash from oil pressing finds uses as fuel for heating, fertilizer for gardens, and even building material when mixed with clay. The social status implications are equally interesting. You can identify wealthy households by the quality of olive oil they use for different purposes, and the truly prosperous use, premium oil for their lamps, while most families reserve the best grades for special occasions and use cheaper oil for everyday lighting and maintenance tasks. Historians still argue whether this multifunctional use of olive oil developed rapidly or evolved over centuries of experimentation. The archaeological evidence suggests that many of these applications were indeed practiced in classical Athens, though the specific techniques and quality standards may have varied significantly. As you watch a wealthy Athenian woman applying olive oil to her hair as a conditioning treatment while her servant fills lamps with a lower grade of the same substance, you realize that Athena's gift has become more than just an agricultural product. It's the foundation of an entire lifestyle that touches every aspect of daily life. You soar above the expanding Greek world as Athena embarks on what might be history's first agricultural expansion campaign, spreading her olive empire across the Mediterranean with the systematic precision of a divine multinational corporation. What began as a simple gift to Athens has evolved into an ambitious project to transform the entire ancient world's relationship with agriculture, one carefully planted grove at a time. The goddess approaches this expansion with the same strategic thinking she brings to military campaigns, but instead of conquering territory through force, she's winning hearts and minds through agricultural prosperity. You watch as Athena appears to farmers throughout the Greek colonies, always arriving with a handful of olive saplings and the kind of patient instruction that turns skeptical mortals into enthusiastic converts. The island of Crete becomes her first major success story beyond Athens. You observe as Athena introduces olive cultivation to Minoan farmers who had been struggling with the limitations of grain agriculture on their rocky, mountainous terrain. The olive trees thrive in conditions that would challenge other crops, transforming marginal land into productive groves that will support Cretan civilization for millennia. The expansion strategy is remarkably sophisticated. Rather than simply dropping off olive trees and hoping for the best, Athena establishes comprehensive agricultural education programs. She teaches not just planting and harvesting techniques, but the entire economic ecosystem that makes olive cultivation, profitable oil processing, quality grading, storage methods, and even marketing strategies for reaching distant markets. You notice that each new olive-growing region develops its own distinctive characteristics, reflecting local soil conditions, climate variations, and cultural preferences. The olives of Lesbos produce oil with a distinctive peppery flavor that becomes prized throughout the eastern Mediterranean. The groves of southern Italy yield particularly large fruit that proves excellent for both oil production and table olives. Its agricultural diversity emerging from a single divine gift. The cultural adaptations are equally fascinating to witness. In regions where Athena isn't the primary deity, local religious traditions incorporate olive cultivation into their existing pantheons. You watch as Egyptian farmers dedicate their olive groves to Isis, while Phoenician merchants invoke their sea gods to protect olive oil shipments. The tree transcends religious boundaries while maintaining its sacred status. Archaeological evidence supports this pattern of olive expansion throughout the classical period. Olive pollen in sediment cores shows the spread of cultivation across the Mediterranean, while ceramic studies reveal the development of specialized oil storage and transport vessels in regions that adopted olive agriculture. The mythological expansion reflects genuine historical patterns. The economic networks that emerge from this agricultural expansion create unprecedented levels of international cooperation. You observe merchant ships carrying not just olive oil, but olive saplings, pressing equipment, and even specialized agricultural knowledge between distant ports. It's technology transfer on a scale that won't be seen again until the modern era. The competitive dynamics between olive-growing regions drive continuous innovation in cultivation techniques. You watch as farmers experiment with different pruning methods, irrigation systems, and soil treatments, each trying to produce oil that will command premium prices in increasingly sophisticated markets. The goddess of wisdom has inadvertently sparked an agricultural arms race. The political implications are profound. City-states that successfully adopt olive cultivation gain economic advantages that translate into military and diplomatic power. You can see alliances forming based on olive trade relationships, while regions that resist or fail at olive cultivation find themselves increasingly marginalized in the Mediterranean's evolving economic hierarchy. But Athena's expansion isn't limited to simple agricultural colonization. You observe her establishing what amount to agricultural research centers in key locations, specialized facilities where the best farmers share knowledge, experiment with new techniques, and develop improved olive varieties. It's institutional knowledge creation that ensures the sustainability of her olive empire. The environmental impact of this expansion is generally positive, which probably wasn't accidental given Athena's wisdom. Olive trees prevent soil erosion on hillsides. Their deep roots help manage water resources, and their long productive lifespans create stable ecosystems that support diverse wildlife. It's sustainable agriculture that improves rather than depletes the landscape. Historians still argue whether this rapid expansion of olive cultivation represents actual historical development compressed into mythological narrative, or whether it reflects the gradual spread of agricultural techniques over several centuries. The archaeological evidence suggests that olive cultivation did indeed expand dramatically during the classical period, though the timeline may have been longer than the myths suggest. The social changes that accompany olive expansion are equally significant. You watch as nomadic societies settle into permanent communities built around olive groves, while established agricultural societies reorganize their economies around this new source of wealth. Entire cultures are transformed by the patient cultivation of Athena's gift. As you observe the goddess surveying her expanding olive empire from Mount Olympus, you can see the satisfaction in her expression. What began as a simple competition with Poseidon has evolved into a project that's reshaping the ancient world, creating prosperity and stability that will support the development of philosophy, art, and democracy. Her agricultural revolution is laying the foundation for classical civilization itself. You witness one of history's most peculiar transformations as Athena's olive tree evolves from agricultural commodity into universal symbol of peace. Despite being the gift of a goddess whose primary job description includes strategic warfare and helping heroes kill monsters more efficiently, the irony isn't lost on you as you watch olive branches being waved by diplomats who are simultaneously praying to the same deity for victory in battle. The symbolic evolution begins almost accidentally. You observe the first recorded instance during a minor border dispute between Athens and one of its neighbors, when an elderly Athenian farmer approaches the enemy camp carrying an olive branch as a flag of truce. His reasoning is practical rather than symbolic, needs to retrieve his wandering goats from the disputed territory, and the olive branch simply identifies him as an Athenian citizen under Athena's protection. But something about the image resonates powerfully with both sides of the conflict. The olive branch represents not just Athenian identity, but the prosperity and stability that comes from patient cultivation rather than violent conquest. You can see the enemy soldiers' expressions soften as they recognize the symbolic contrast between the farmer's peaceful olive branch and their own bronze-tipped spears. The diplomatic community embraces this symbolism with the enthusiasm of people who've been looking for alternatives to the traditional "we'll negotiate after we've killed enough of each other" approach to international relations. You watch as olive branches become standard equipment for envoys and ambassadors throughout the Greek world, transforming Athena's agricultural gift into a diplomatic tool. The religious implications are complex and occasionally contradictory. Temples dedicated to Athena begin incorporating olive branch motifs into their architecture and ceremonies, celebrating both her martial prowess and her peaceful agricultural gifts. You observe priests attempting to reconcile these seemingly opposite aspects of the goddess, developing theological explanations that position wisdom as the bridge between war and peace. The artistic representations of this symbolism multiply rapidly throughout the Mediterranean world. You see olive branches appearing in sculptural reliefs, painted pottery, and even architectural decorations on buildings that have nothing to do with either agriculture or warfare. The symbol has transcended its practical origins to become a universal visual language for peaceful intentions. Archaeological evidence from the classical period shows olive branch motifs appearing on coins, diplomatic seals, and official documents throughout the Greek world. The symbol's adoption by non-Greek cultures suggests that its peaceful associations were recognized across cultural and linguistic boundaries, making it one of history's first truly international symbols. The evolution of olive branch symbolism creates interesting paradoxes in Greek culture. You watch as the same warriors who pray to Athena for victory in battle also carry olive branches when they approach enemy cities to negotiate surrender terms. The goddess of war has inadvertently become the patron of peace negotiations, though she probably doesn't mind, since successful diplomacy often achieves strategic objectives more efficiently than warfare. The Olympic Games, those great celebrations of competitive athletics that occasionally break out into actual violence, adopt the olive branch as their primary symbol of peaceful competition. You observe athletes being crowned with olive wreaths rather than gold medals, transforming Athena's tree into a symbol of achievement through excellence rather than destruction of opponents. The literary tradition embraces olive branch symbolism with the kind of enthusiasm that creates lasting cultural myths. Poets begin incorporating olive branches into their descriptions of peaceful scenes, while playwrights use them as dramatic props to signal moments of reconciliation and resolution. The symbol becomes so associated with peaceful outcomes that audiences immediately understand its dramatic significance. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of this symbolic evolution is how it influences actual diplomatic practice. You notice that negotiations conducted under the olive branch seem to result in more durable agreements than those arranged through simple military exhaustion. There's something psychologically powerful about invoking Athena's agricultural wisdom rather than just her martial prowess. The commercial applications are inevitable and occasionally absurd. You watch as merchants begin using olive branch decorations on their shops and trade goods, suggesting that their business practices embody peaceful prosperity rather than cutthroat competition. It's ancient marketing that trades on religious symbolism to build customer trust. Historians still argue whether the olive branch's association with peace developed organically from its agricultural significance or was deliberately promoted by Greek diplomatic and religious authorities. The archaeological evidence suggests that the symbol was indeed widely recognized throughout the classical period, though its specific meanings may have varied between cultures and contexts. The international adoption of olive branch symbolism creates a form of cultural soft power that extends Greek influence far beyond their military capabilities. You observe foreign dignitaries learning to recognize and use olive branch imagery in their interactions with Greek city-states, effectively adopting Greek cultural symbols as part of international diplomatic protocol. The theological implications continue to puzzle religious scholars. How does Athena, the goddess who literally sprang from Zeus's head fully armed for battle, become associated with peaceful negotiation? The answer seems to lie in her role as goddess of wisdom, the intelligence to know when fighting is unnecessary, and the creativity to find alternatives to violence. As you watch olive branches being carried by diplomats across the ancient world, you realize that Athena has achieved something unprecedented. She's created a symbol that represents the possibility of prosperity without conquest, security without domination, and victory without destruction. Her agricultural gift has become humanity's first universal language of peace. You drift through the expanding olive-growing regions of the ancient world as local communities develop their own distinctive relationships with Athena's gift, creating a fascinating mosaic of agricultural variations that would make modern terroir enthusiasts weep with joy. Each region, it turns out, doesn't just grow olives, they grow their own particular version of olives, shaped by local soil, climate, and cultural preferences into varieties as distinctive as fingerprints. The island of Lesbos emerges as the first major competitor to Athenian olive supremacy, and you can observe the friendly rivalry that develops between the two regions. Lesbian olives produce oil with a distinctively peppery, almost spicy flavor that commands premium prices in eastern Mediterranean markets. The island's farmers claim that their volcanic soil and constant sea breezes create growing conditions that even Athena couldn't replicate elsewhere. You watch as lesbian olive growers develop their own religious traditions around cultivation, invoking the local goddess Saphois, that Saphoas, a patron of their agricultural efforts. They argue, with the kind of theological creativity that would impress modern marketing teams, that poetry and olive cultivation both require patience, sensitivity, and an appreciation for subtle flavors that develop over time. The competition drives innovation in ways that benefit everyone involved. You observe lesbian farmers experimenting with different harvesting times, discovering that olives picked slightly earlier than the Athenian standard produce oil with more complex flavor profiles. Meanwhile, Athenian growers respond by developing new pressing techniques that extract maximum flavor from their traditional varieties. It's agricultural arms race disguised as friendly competition. The southern Italian colonies present an entirely different approach to olive cultivation. You watch as Greek settlers adapt their techniques to local conditions, producing olives that are larger, meatier, and better suited for eating fresh rather than pressing for oil. These table olives create an entirely new market category, transforming olives from industrial commodity to gourmet food. The Italian innovation comes partly from necessity. The local climate produces olives with lower oil content but superior flavor and texture for direct consumption. Rather than seeing this as a disadvantage, Italian olive growers embrace it as an opportunity to create premium products that can't be replicated elsewhere. They develop elaborate curing and seasoning techniques that transform raw olives into delicacies worthy of the finest banquets. Archaeological evidence from Magna Graecia, Greek colonies in southern Italy shows sophisticated olive processing facilities designed specifically for table olive production rather than oil extraction. These installations include elaborate brining tanks, flavoring chambers, and storage facilities that suggest a highly developed specialty food industry. The Spanish coastlands, where Greek traders established their westernmost olive outposts, develop yet another variation on Athena's theme. You observe Spanish olive growers discovering that their intense sunlight and dry climate produce olives with exceptional keeping qualities. Spanish olive oil doesn't just taste different, it lasts longer without spoiling, making it particularly valuable for long-distance trade. The Spanish innovation leads to the development of what might be called the ancient world's first global commodity brand. Spanish olive oil becomes the preferred choice for merchants undertaking long voyages, explorers establishing distant colonies, and anyone else who needs oil that will remain fresh for months or even years. It's premium pricing based on superior preservation characteristics. But perhaps the most interesting development occurs in the North African colonies, where olive cultivation encounters entirely different cultural and environmental conditions. You watch as Phoenician and Egyptian farmers adapt Greek olive varieties to desert-edge agriculture, creating drought-resistant trees that produce small, intensely flavored olives perfectly suited to the local climate. The North African adaptation requires completely different cultivation techniques. You observe farmers developing sophisticated irrigation systems, shade management practices, and soil conditioning methods that allow olive trees to thrive in conditions that would kill most Mediterranean crops. It's agricultural engineering that pushes the boundaries of what's possible with olive cultivation. The religious implications of these regional variations create fascinating theological discussions. Each region claims that their particular olive variety represents Athena's special blessing for their specific location and culture. You can see priests developing elaborate explanations for why the goddess would create different olive types for different peoples, usually involving divine wisdom being perfectly adapted to local needs. Historians still argue whether these regional olive varieties represent natural adaptation to local conditions or deliberate breeding programs by ancient farmers. The genetic evidence from modern olive trees suggests that many classical varieties were indeed distinct cultivars that required centuries of selective breeding to develop. The economic competition between olive-growing regions drives the development of increasingly sophisticated marketing strategies. You watch as different regions begin branding their oils with distinctive pottery styles, quality certifications, and even primitive forms of geographical origin labeling. It's the beginning of what modern economists would recognize as product differentiation in commodity markets. The cultural pride associated with local olive varieties becomes a significant factor in regional identity. You observe communities that define themselves partly through their distinctive olive characteristics, incorporating their agricultural achievements into local mythology, artistic traditions, and even military symbolism. Olive variety becomes a form of cultural nationalism. As you survey the expanding network of olive-growing regions, each developing its own specialties and claiming its own divine favor, you realize that Athena's simple gift has spawned not just an industry, but an entire ecosystem of agricultural innovation, cultural pride, and economic competition that's reshaping the ancient world's understanding of what agriculture can achieve. You fast forward through the centuries, watching as Athena's ancient gift evolves from mythological curiosity into the foundation of an entire civilization that continues to shape the modern world in ways that would astonish the original Athenian olive farmers. The olive tree's influence has spread far beyond its Mediterranean birthplace, becoming so deeply embedded in global culture that most people have forgotten its divine origins. The Roman Empire embraces olive cultivation with the systematic efficiency that characterizes all their best conquests. You observe Roman engineers developing improved pressing techniques, Roman merchants establishing olive oil trade routes that span from Britain to Egypt, and Roman soldiers carrying olive saplings to establish groves in distant provinces. What began as Athena's gift to Athens has become the backbone of imperial agriculture. The religious transformation is equally remarkable. As Christianity spreads through the former Roman territories, olive oil becomes central to the new faith's rituals. You watch as olive oil is used for baptisms, confirmations, and the consecration of priest-sacred ceremonies that unknowingly honor Athena's ancient gift while serving an entirely different theological purpose. The goddess of wisdom has inadvertently become part of Christian tradition. Medieval monasteries preserve and advance olive cultivation techniques during the chaos that follows Rome's collapse. You observe monks developing new varieties, improving processing methods, and maintaining detailed agricultural records that serve as the foundation for modern olive science. Monastic communities become centers of agricultural innovation, though they credit divine providence rather than ancient Greek goddesses for their success. The Renaissance brings scientific rigor to olive cultivation for the first time since classical antiquity. You watch as scholars begin studying olive botany, soil chemistry, and processing techniques with the methodical approach that characterizes the period's intellectual revolution. Leonardo da Vinci himself sketches improved olive press designs, applying engineering principles to equipment that had remained essentially unchanged for centuries. The age of exploration carries olive cultivation to entirely new continents. You observe Spanish conquistadors planting olive groves in California and South America, while European colonists establish olive cultivation in Australia and South Africa. Athena's Mediterranean gift becomes a global agricultural phenomenon, adapting to climates and conditions the ancient Greeks never imagined. The Industrial Revolution transforms olive oil production from craft to science. You watch as steam-powered presses, chemical extraction methods, and standardized quality control systems replace traditional techniques that had been passed down through generations. Modern olive oil production achieves levels of efficiency and consistency that would seem miraculous to ancient farmers. Archaeological discoveries in the 19th and 20th centuries reveal the true extent of ancient olive cultivation. You observe scholars excavating olive presses, analyzing ancient amphora residues, and mapping the distribution of olive cultivation throughout the classical world. The physical evidence confirms that olive oil was indeed as central to ancient Mediterranean civilization as the myths suggested. The modern Mediterranean diet movement rediscovers olive oil's health benefits with the kind of scientific enthusiasm that treats ancient wisdom as cutting-edge discovery. You watch as researchers document olive oil's cardiovascular benefits, antioxidant properties, and role in preventing various diseases. Athena's gift, it turns out, was promoting human health for millennia before anyone understood the biochemical mechanisms involved. Contemporary olive oil production has become a sophisticated global industry that combines ancient techniques with modern technology. You observe high-tech facilities that monitor pressing temperatures, test chemical compositions, and grade oils with precision that exceeds anything possible in the ancient world. Yet the fundamental process crushing olives and separating oil from pulp remains essentially unchanged from techniques developed in classical Athens. The cultural significance of olive oil has only deepened over time. You watch as olive branches continue to symbolize peace in international diplomacy, olive wreaths crown Olympic champions, and olive oil features in cuisines from California to China. Athena's agricultural gift has become perhaps the most universally recognized symbol of Mediterranean culture. Climate change presents new challenges for modern olive cultivation that echo ancient concerns about protecting sacred groves. You observe farmers developing drought-resistant varieties, implementing sustainable farming practices, and adapting to changing weather patterns with the same innovative spirit that characterized ancient olive cultivation. The goddess of wisdom would probably approve of these adaptive strategies. The premium olive oil market has evolved into something that would astonish ancient merchants. You watch as single estate oils command prices that reflect terroir, harvesting techniques, and processing methods with the kind of sophistication usually associated with fine wine. Athena's simple gift has become a luxury commodity worthy of the goddess herself. Historians still argue whether the mythological accounts of olive cultivation's origins reflect actual historical development or represent later attempts to explain agricultural traditions whose true origins had been forgotten. The archaeological evidence suggests that olive cultivation was indeed central to ancient Mediterranean civilization, though whether it developed exactly as the myths describe remains debatable. The genetic analysis of modern olive varieties reveals connections to ancient cultivars that span millennia. You observe scientists tracing olive DNA back through centuries of cultivation, discovering that some modern trees are direct descendants of varieties grown in classical Athens. Athena's gift continues to flourish, carrying genetic memories of its divine origins into the modern world. As you survey the global olive industry spanning continents, supporting millions of farmers, and producing billions of liters of oil annually, you realize that Athena's simple competition victory has grown into one of agriculture's greatest success stories. The olive tree has become humanity's partner in a relationship that continues to evolve and thrive after more than 2 millennia. You drift back to Mount Olympus in the present day, where Athena sits beneath an ancient olive tree that might very well be a descendant of her original gift to Athens. The goddess of wisdom has aged gracefully, which is to say, not at all. But there's a deep contentment in her expression that speaks to the satisfaction of a project well completed. Her owl perches nearby, occasionally hooting what sounds remarkably like approval as they survey the world below. From her divine vantage point, Athena can see the fruits of her ancient labor spreading across the entire planet. Olive groves flourish on every continent except Antarctica, their silvery leaves catching sunlight from California to Australia, from Morocco to Japan. What began as a simple gift to win a local patronage competition has become one of humanity's most enduring agricultural partnerships. The scale of her success would be staggering if it weren't so quietly integrated into daily life. You observe millions of people beginning their days with olive oil, drizzling it over bread, cooking with it, using it in cosmetics, or simply enjoying its taste without giving a moment's thought to its divine origins. Athena's gift has become so fundamental to human civilization that it's essentially invisible, the way the most successful innovations often are. The economic impact alone would make any ancient merchant weep with envy. The global olive oil industry generates billions of dollars annually, supports entire regional economies, and provides livelihoods for millions of farmers, processors, and distributors. From her divine perspective, Athena can see the vast networks of commerce that have grown from her single-planted seed cargo ships carrying olive oil across oceans, specialty shops selling premium varieties, and restaurants featuring olive oil tastings as sophisticated as wine appreciation. But perhaps what pleases Athena most is how her gift has fostered exactly the kind of wisdom she values most highly. You watch as she observes modern olive farmers applying scientific methods to improve their cultivation, researchers studying olive oil's health benefits, and chefs exploring new culinary applications. The olive industry has become a center of continuous learning and innovation, embodying the intellectual curiosity that the goddess holds dear. The environmental benefits of olive cultivation continue to vindicate Athena's original choice. You see her watching with approval as olive trees prevent soil erosion on hillsides, support biodiversity in their groves, and sequester carbon in their long-lived wood. Her agricultural gift has become a tool for environmental stewardship, helping humanity work with, rather than against, natural systems. The cultural legacy is equally profound. Olive branches still symbolize peace in international relations. Olympic victors still wear olive wreaths. And Mediterranean cuisine built around olive oil has become one of the world's most influential culinary traditions. Athena's gift has shaped not just agriculture, but art, literature, politics, and philosophy. The olive tree appears in countless paintings, poems, and stories, usually carrying meanings of peace, wisdom, and abundance. The religious and spiritual dimensions of olive cultivation persist across multiple faith traditions. You observe Athena watching as olive oil continues to play central roles in Christian, Jewish, and Islamic ceremonies, while secular spirituality movements embrace olive groves as places of meditation and reflection. Her gift transcends religious boundaries while maintaining its sacred character. The technological evolution of olive cultivation demonstrates the kind of adaptive wisdom that Athena appreciates most. Modern farmers use satellite imagery to monitor grove health, employ precision irrigation systems to optimize water usage, and apply biotechnology to develop improved varieties. Yet the fundamental relationship between human and tree remains unchanged: patient cultivation yielding long-term abundance. Archaeological discoveries continue to reveal new details about ancient olive cultivation, confirming the central role it played in classical civilization. You watch as Athena observes scholars excavating olive presses, analyzing ancient DNA, and mapping trade routes that carried olive oil throughout the ancient world. The physical evidence validates the mythological accounts, while revealing the true sophistication of ancient agricultural science. Climate change presents new challenges that echo ancient concerns about protecting sacred groves. You see Athena watching as modern farmers develop drought-resistant varieties, implement sustainable practices, and adapt to changing weather patterns. The goddess of wisdom recognizes the same innovative spirit that drove ancient olive cultivation, now applied to contemporary environmental challenges. The premium olive oil market has evolved into something that combines ancient craft traditions with modern quality standards. You observe Athena's approval as she watches single estate producers who treat olive oil with the same reverence once reserved for sacred offerings, creating products that honor the tree's divine origins while serving contemporary tastes. As evening approaches on Mount Olympus, Athena reaches up and plucks an olive from the branch above her head. She examines it with the same careful attention she brought to her original gift, then smiles with the deep satisfaction of someone whose work has exceeded even divine expectations. Her simple seed has grown into one of humanity's greatest success stories, providing sustenance, prosperity, beauty, and wisdom to countless generations. The olive tree, that humble gift from a competitive goddess, has become humanity's partner in a relationship that continues to evolve and flourish after more than 2 millennia. From her peaceful retirement beneath its branches, Athena can see that her greatest victory wasn't won on any battlefield, but in the patient cultivation of wisdom that grows stronger with each passing season. The goddess closes her eyes and listens to the gentle rustle of olive leaves in the evening breeze, a sound that now echoes across every continent where humans have learned to appreciate the gifts that come from careful tending, patient waiting, and the wisdom to nurture rather than simply consume. Her work here is done, and it is very, very good. As our journey through Athena's olive empire draws to its gentle close, let yourself sink deeper into the soft comfort of your bed, feeling the weight of centuries settling around you like a warm blanket woven from silvery olive leaves. The goddess of wisdom rests now beneath her ancient tree, her competitive spirit finally at peace, knowing that her simple gift has grown into something far greater than victory in a divine contest. Picture yourself walking through one of those Mediterranean olive groves we visited tonight, the late afternoon sun filtering through silver-green canopies, casting dappled shadows that dance across the ancient earth. The air carries the subtle fragrance of olive blossoms and the distant sound of waves against rocky shores. Each tree stands as a living monument to patience and wisdom, their gnarled trunks holding stories of countless harvests, festivals, and quiet moments of human connection with the divine. Feel your breathing slow and deepen as you imagine touching the smooth bark of an olive tree that might be descended from Athena's original gift. The connection spans millennia from ancient Athens to your peaceful moment tonight, from divine competition to human cooperation, from a single seed to a global embrace of wisdom made manifest in leaf and fruit and golden oil. Let the gentle rhythm of your breath match the eternal cycles of olive cultivation, the patient planting, the slow growth, the abundant harvest, the careful processing, and the sharing of nature's bounty across cultures and centuries. In this ancient rhythm, find your own peace, your own connection to the wisdom that grows quietly, persistently, lovingly in gardens both earthly and divine. Sleep now, cradled by stories older than cities, comforted by the knowledge that some gifts grow more beautiful with time, and that wisdom, like olive trees, rewards those who tend it patiently. Dream of silvery leaves rustling in warm Mediterranean breezes, and wake tomorrow with a little more appreciation for the simple miracles that surround us daily, unnoticed and eternal.